My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans.
Hello and welcome back to MagisTalk. I'm Dan Finucane and I'm joined by my co-host and brother Jesuit, Ian Michael Peoples.
I got the middle name today. Today we're joined by another special guest visiting Belize, Father Tom Curran. Father Tom served as president of Rockhurst University in Kansas City for 16 years from 2006 to 2022. And he now serves as the director of a new initiative of the Jesuit Central and Southern Province, to which we three belong. That initiative is called the Jesuit Prison Education Network, or JPEN for short. And we'll hear more about that during our show. But Father Tom, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Good to be with you. And good to be with you, Dan. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. And since you've been in Belize, you've already visited Placencia.
I have.
You got over to, but for meetings. It wasn't for vacation.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. It was for meetings.
Meetings. It's very important. Meetings.
We minister to God's people everywhere.
Wherever God calls.
That's right.
Very good. Well, Father Tom, we like to begin our interviews with kind of the same question for everybody. And that question is basically, you know, your upbringing. What was it like, and how did faith play a role in your growing up? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and thanks for the question. And so my background and my upbringing, so I'm the fifth of six children, grew up in Philadelphia, PA, and we're doing this contemporaneous with the Super Bowl. So and having lived in Kansas City, I had a torn heart between Philadelphia and Kansas City. So, but fifth of six children, 5 boys, 1 girl. Grew up in a parish, St. Martin of Tours, different from St. Martin de Porres. Martin of Tours parish, where there were 5,800 families, 18,000 parishioners, and 2,800 students in the grade school. There were 6 and 7 sections of every grade. So I graduated from 8th grade with 300 classmates.
I mean, that's a mega church. I thought only the evangelicals had the mega churches.
Or Texas.
So mega churches were the norm at that time in a city like Philadelphia, where literally the next parish was just 1.5 miles away. Wow. And there were all these, some would say, these Catholic factories of thousands of students. So that was my background, where everything was within walking distance. And yes, I did walk to school both ways, and it wasn't uphill, and it wasn't a mile, it was just a block and a half, as was everyone else.
But it was still through the snow.
But, right? Yep, so without shoes. So that was, but more fundamentally, what was that like in a neighborhood where there were, unfortunately, there were 2 schools. There were Catholic schools and there were the public schools, and so we identified one another as, you're a Catholic and you're a public. That's just the way we did it. I'm not saying that was right, but that was just kind of the norm at that time, right? Or it shouldn't have been the norm, but that foundation was one of deep faith. So my parents very much instructed us in the faith by how they lived. Very, very, very modest resources, but extremely generous in being very, very present. And I think clearly the motto of the environment where I grew up was, the kids are whatever the kids want. Not in terms of things, but just being very, very present. So that accompaniment, if you will, that being present in our activities, in our sports, in our games, this was very much a part of our lives. They were always there for us, even though Dad worked in a factory, and my mom worked as we were going to school later at Sears, which was right up the street from us, the big catalog place. And So strong examples of just being very much accompanied, and faith being the most important thing that you give. And so I'm very grateful for all the things, for the faith that they really provided to us, gifted us, and showed us how to live. And that I believe is, the vocation would come later, but the gift of their faith, the whole expression, they'll preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. They preach the gospel every day by their generosity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like, I don't know if they ever sat you down and said, this is what it means to be Catholic, but it sounds like they really showed you just by the way that they were present to you and loved you.
Very much so, very much so. I'm very, very grateful for that, right? So, not perfect family, I don't know if we were today's modern family, but we were a pretty typical family at that time, where the church was, I think there were 12 masses on the weekend. We had an upstairs church and a downstairs church. The one had, 1,200 seats, and the other had 1,000. And no one drove. And my siblings and I, we would make fun of the people. Can you imagine there's such and such family? They drove to church. No one drives to church. So that was the experience. And then from there, I went on to Father Judge High School, run by the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales. Desired to go to a Jesuit school. That was not in the cards, money-wise. So went to Father Judge, had a great opportunity there, met the Oblates, and then from there went to, again, knew I was going to, at that time in the 70s, going to college. Residential programs were not prevalent. So there's the big 5 schools in Philadelphia: Penn, Temple, Villanova, St. Joe's, and LaSalle. And my sites were between LaSalle and St. Joe's. LaSalle being Christian Brothers, St. Joe's being the Jesuit. And it all came down to who was going to provide the most money and the scholarship. And LaSalle was extremely generous. St. Joe's was generous. So half my buddies were at St. Joe's, half were at LaSalle, and then at Temple. So there, went to LaSalle, and then from LaSalle, then transferred to De Sales University. And then it was from De Sales that entered the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales. Desire was to be a teacher, then to go to law school, then to practice. I went to the practice of politics, and it was in college that wait a minute, is there a possibility of doing this teaching in a different way? And then from there, so my desire was always to be in the classroom. And then from the college experience, entered the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales. Always seriously thought about the Society of Jesus. Did not think I was capable of that. Did not think I had the intellectual heft or capacity for that. And so that was just a desire, and I was contented, and was in the Oblates, and was teaching in high school, teaching part-time in college, and then did go on to get a law degree, desire to practice immigration law, work with the poor. And then was also considered for college, leadership, administration. The Oblates had one college. Was given the permission to order off the menu, as they say. And because I thought it'd be good to go to another school and then to come back, right? And so was given permission to throw my resume out there, what that might look like. And I had a variety of schools, and several Jesuit schools, including Regis, where Father Mike Curran said, hey, I think we've got a model here. Your background is in, by that time I had been in school leadership, so I had been, has been called to be a president of an inner city school, North Catholic, at the time was...
This was in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, really. And then was president of our private school in Wilmington, Delaware, and was also started in Nativity Middle School while I was there. And then was given the opportunity to get this college leadership with the training and then come back. So was at Regis University in Denver, Colorado as a vice president for advancement, campaign efforts, living in the residence halls, teaching, kind of getting it all. And during that time, during my own formation, during the novitiate, there was always this thought of, the Society of Jesus, and that came back strong, very strong when I was at Regis. And was a little puzzled by that. Where's this coming from? I thought we resolved this. I thought I addressed this. And so was given permission to explore, through this discernment process. I did the exercises with this question: Are you or are you not calling me to be a member of the Society of Jesus?
And what year was this?
This would have been in the early. This is 2000, I guess. So I was at Regis from 2003, 4, and then so this would have been, I don't know, 8, 9 or whatever, 7, 8, 9. I guess, or no, I guess when I was at Regis, right? But while I was at Regis, there was the opportunity to come. The presidency opened up at Rockhurst. I was invited to. I've got my chronology off here. I was invited to consider that, and was given permission to do that. But my question was, why is that? Am I able to do that? To have someone from a different? And they said the bigger question is, are you willing to do that? So I went to Regis University as an oblate of St. Francis of Sales. And was there, and then continued that discernment and that consideration, and it was going, it was kept gnawing at me in a good way. And that's when, through the permission of the oblates as well as, and I was living with the Society of Jesus in Rockhurst. So given the opportunity to, where's this coming from? Did the exercises with this question: Are you or are you not calling me to be a member of the Lease Society? And the answer came back very clearly: I'm calling you to a deeper relationship. I said, well, that's not the question. I asked, are you calling me a member? And the answer came back very clearly: I'm calling you to a deeper relationship. Like, okay, let me repeat the question third time. And I'm like, I don't think you're listening. Are you calling? And the answer came back: no, you're the one that's not listening. I call you to a deeper relationship. I don't call you to be an oblate or a Jesuit. That's a manifestation of responding to the call. That brought me to a place of intense freedom. And so how am I going to go deeper? And then got clarity around, if this assists you in going deeper, then I bless that. And then I went down that track. And so because I was already in final vows, there's a whole canon law formula, not surprising, right, for how someone does that. And so I was put on canonical probation, which means I lost my initials, still a priest. I had to live with the Society of Jesus and went through a formation at that time. And it was designed, at the time, Father Marcuier, the provincial, and others said, no, let's have the formation while he's continuing this work. So I was going through my formation while I was president.
Which is completely unique for a Jesuit. That's a completely unique path for a Jesuit. And just to get a sense of where you're at in the past. So you entered the Oblates initially in what year was that?
Well, that would have been in the mid-70s.
Mid-70s. And then you were ordained?
Oh, yeah, I was ordained.
10 years later?
Yeah, exactly.
7 years later?
Yeah, mid-80s.
Mid-80s, okay, great. Yeah. So you've been serving as a priest for close to
absolutely.
20 years.
Precisely.
Plus. Okay.
Yes. Exactly.
As you look back on your time prior to becoming a Jesuit and that initial draw, it seems like since you were a kid, right, you wanted to go to a Jesuit high school, and then considering the Society of Jesus, and maybe, I don't know why you would doubt your intellectual abilities, but like maybe feeling like, I don't know if that could be for me. What was it about the Society of Jesus that was so, that drew you in? If you had to put your finger on it?
It was never a rejection of, but it was the way of responding to the response that I got from God in prayer, which is, I want you to go deeper. And so what does that mean? Deeper into the vocation, right? Into the commitment. So why did I ultimately seek to be a member of the Lease Society? for the salvation of my soul. It was, I need this to deepen that relationship. In a nutshell, that was the response. And is God, is the society, are the oblates going to bless this? And so then they created this bridge over which to walk. And so if we go through this process and have this formation, this instruction, and that was so rich, but realized it was less about knowing the things. Like I wanted to just read as much as I possibly could and just go deeper and deeper into, but it was moved from it being a thing to being a way and an experience.
And the word that you used earlier was freedom.
Yes.
You know, which is so a part of Ignatian spirituality. It's one of, I think, the central concepts, you know, that the longer title of the spiritual exercises, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it's paragraph 23, which is like, you know, and by this means to free oneself from all disordered attachments and orders. You know, it's this like very long thing that's ultimately about do these exercises in order to be free to respond to the call.
Agreed.
And free to become who we are, that God is calling us to be, to serve in a more faithful way, more free way.
Yeah.
So to hear you talk about freedom, and it's freedom even in the face of like, well, hold on here, I'm already part of a group.
That's right.
I've made final vows. And I think that's a level of freedom that probably only comes through grace, I would imagine.
I think so, yeah. And the grace is not one time, but it's continuing, right? So, and grace is gift, right? So, and there's a freedom, there's also, there's a bit of unsettlement, because my life was focused and knew what I was about, and you know, why are you doing this? Are you doing this to accomplish this or whatever? It truly, this notion of, you know, was I being called to serve as the president of Rockhurst, or recruited? And I believe I was called, but that was just the first layer of this call, is to enable you to go deeper into responding to the call.
One thing that occurs to me for our viewers is that you sort of live this example of being able to respond to God's call when you were in a state in life that could have been fairly settled, right? You could have said, all right, I have final vows as an oblate, you know, I have, you know, president of a university, and I'm okay, you know. But you felt that call to go deeper. You felt that call to respond to God's invitation to a deeper relationship, and you responded. And I think for a lot of our viewers, maybe particularly for people who might have themselves, like you've already had a career, you know, and you've raised a family, and you're settled in life. Well, maybe God is calling you to go deeper, and it's a matter of listening and then responding to that call. And I love what you said about, you know, that you becoming a Jesuit or becoming an oblate was a manifestation of the response of this call that God has given you.
It's a means.
It's a means. And I think God is calling all of us, right? God is calling all of us. And so for our viewers out there, I hope you think about, how is God calling you today? That's really important.
No, I agree. It's you know, whether it's as a single person, and it's in consecrated life, or in marriage, right? They are means. They are ways to assist us, right? They're part of the graces, right? So to your point, I guess you could say I was living large, and there's a place of comfort in living large, but then we're invited to live small, and there's an incredible freedom with living small. There's also a level of uncertainty, and so yeah, it can be discombobulated at times, right? It doesn't mean that there's not doubt, but you know, at any given moment, you know, is this an opportunity to go deeper into the response? You know, the whole notion of we're not called to be successful, we're called to be faithful. And how is it that I'm going to be faithful? And at this time, I continue to see those graces to say, this is the way that you deepen the relationship. This is the way to help build up the kingdom. This is the way that you're being responsible and accountable for your soul in the presence of God, and with God's grace, you move forward.
Yeah. Seeking what we would call the more, or magis.
Magis.
Yeah.
We should talk about that sometime.
We should.
That'd be a good title for a program.
Yeah, it really would. Well, maybe shifting a little bit, and talking about your time as a president of the university, from 06 to 2022.
That's correct.
A lot of cultural shifts happened during those 16 years, and so, the internet boom, certainly technology took huge advances, and in that time, education probably shifted a lot as far as what people were wanting out of education, expecting it to do for them, all that kind of, all of that. So, what shifts did you see during that time, and what opportunities opened up specifically for Jesuit education?
Okay. Great question. So I think, we speak about being for and with. And to me, the for should be in lowercase and the with should be in all caps. And I think that is an essential element of Jesuit education in all of our works, right? That it helps us come to an appreciation and a response to what does it mean to be with.
And for our viewers, just real quick, one of the taglines of Jesuit education, you'll see this at SJC, men and women for and with others. So that's what you're talking about.
So I'm referring to that. And this notion of Ignatius, as I understand it, right, he speaks about a company, in compañía de Jesus, right? A companion. So companions come with pan, bread, what better than to break bread with someone to bring to the table. And I believe that was part of the many points of his wisdom, is the notion that we accompany, we walk, and that's an example of Christ, right? I mean, Christ, it's a model of accompaniment. He walks 7 miles out of his way to Emmaus. He has this Zacchaeus come down the tree, even though there's this scoundrel and this just doing some terrible things financially and just real, but accompanies. Woman at the well, he accompanies. And I think that's the model. He clearly understood the gospel message, which is how do we meet people? Do we meet people with these are the obligations? Or does he meet them with accompaniment? And repeatedly he says, what? I've come not to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill. And the fulfillment of that is to be with. And I think that's essential to the gospel, being with. So all of that being said, right, why did the Jesuits get into education? It was to be with. That wasn't the plan. And it was coming from a place of freedom in 1548, saying, okay, we initially need to be with those whom we're forming, but now there's this opportunity for schools. Today, people say, oh, Jesuits, that's all about education. That's why you were started. That was a byproduct, right? As we know, that's not, but the schools give us an opportunity to be with. So in my role as president of the school, to me, it was all about how we are to be companions. And so we use that word very, very intentionally. We refer to one another as companions. We would start each year with an all companions gathering. And how are we accompanying one another? And that notion of the gospel and through that lens, if you will, of this Ignatian identity. As president, one of the taglines that I used for the school, we need to be in the city for good. The school is in Kansas City, Missouri, in the heart of the city. On the west side of the campus is there's affluence. On the eastern side of the city, there's a lot of poverty and violence and failure to accompany. So how is the school going to be in the city for good? For both good that we're to be about, as well as good in terms of longevity. So it was intentional on my part that you do a play on words here. Small school, modest resources, just shy now of 4,000 students. How can we be with? So we were not a school that could bring lots of resources to the table in terms of money, but we could bring accompaniment. And where are those needs, especially the needs of an urban area where we can be in accompaniment. So such things as, as we're told in Vatican II and in the Society of Jesus, we read the signs of the times, we meet people where they are, and we move accordingly. So what are the signs of the times? What are some of the big social issues in the Jesuit under general congregations, right? And certainly after the last 40, 50 years, we really speak about that being, where is it a faith that does justice? And keenly aware of that. So whether it's issues of accompaniment of students of DACA students, undocumented students, or whether it's accompany folks who are in financial stress. So we started a prosperity center for purposes of financial literacy and bankruptcy. Another issue, it was of great concern to me in the United States, is mass incarceration, or what I think is probably more adequately described as mass warehousing. We have, the United States has, give or take, about 5% of the world's population, but we have about 25% of the world's incarcerated. So we have 2 million people incarcerated, and there's about 8 million people incarcerated, and that does not include millions of others who pass through, right? Exactly. So what's that all about? And what are we doing about that, right? So one of the things we could be about is prison reform, and there's value in that. That's a big nut to crack. But something that we do have a little expertise in is education. So may I go into the story of getting into prison education?
Please, yeah, that was going to be my next question. So at Rockhurst.
Yeah, so we have an invitation to kind of so St. Louis University. So Rockhurst is part of, as you mentioned, and all of us are members of the UCS province. So the Society of Jesus in the United States is divided into 4 groups. And our group, the Central Southern Province, used to be 10. We have 13 high schools, middle schools, and then 6 colleges, universities. Another university, St. Louis University, on the eastern part of the state, had a prison program started in 2008. Dan, I believe you've been involved with that and had some connections with that as a student.
I knew the professor who started.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a connection. So that professor, Ken Parker, approached me at the recommendation of Larry Biondi, a Jesuit, and others there, saying, I think Rockhurst would be open to consideration. St. Louis University created something called PEP, Prison Education Programs. Now in its 15th year, we're providing an Associate of Arts degree, art programs, and GED, so equivalency, high school diploma, and does that at Bonne Terre Correctional Facility, which is a men's facility, maximum security, and been doing that 15 years. And then after, it's a minimum level security prison. But they approached us because they wanted to also provide similar programs for women incarcerated. 21 facilities in Missouri, 19 male, 2 women's. Approached, would we consider that? And so over the next couple of years, really explored from 2016 to 2015, 16, 17, and then 17, we roll this out. And now, 7 years into it, Rockhurst has a program providing 9 credit hours a year, 2 cohorts, a cohort of the residents. I'm a little sensitive to speaking about offenders and incarcerated, but the resident students, and then a cohort of correctional staff. We've been at this 7 years. In a year and a half, they will receive their Associate of Arts degree. As I was leaving Rockhurst, Father Tom Green, and you've spoken about in other programs, who's our provincial.
Our viewers have probably know Father Tom as well. We've had him on.
So he had an idea and approached me as I was leaving Rockhurst after 16 years, saying, how about we start coordinating this effort in education in alignment with the universal apostolic preferences of the Society of Jesus. So over the next 10 years, from 2019 to 2029, looking at 4 what I call action verbs: to show, to walk, to accompany, and to collaborate, to show people the way to God through the spiritual exercises, to walk with the marginalized, to accompany the youth in a hope-filled future, and then to collaborate in the care for our common home. Really drilling down, clearly they should not be seen as projects or separating those 4, but the second one, walking with the marginalized, the forgotten, is this an opportunity? So took a little sabbatical, and now am immersed as this coordinator, as you've said, and of JPEN. Again, a little play on words here, Prison Education Network. Let's take what we got at Rockhurst and St. Louis and our other schools, St. John's, Loyola University in New Orleans, Spring Hill in Mobile, Alabama, and Regis University in Denver, Colorado. What if we were to come together and show one another how we're doing prison education? Can we experience some efficiencies, economies of scale, best practices, sharing of resources, and here's our new school, if you will, in among those who are incarcerated. So why is that? Why are we doing that? I think it's very simple. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing this for 2 reasons. One, because it aligns with, we say we're an accompaniment, and we accompany people rooted in our spiritual exercises, the glory of God and the salvation of souls, or the end for which we've been created. And secondly, more fundamentally, we should be doing this. We need to be doing this for the salvation of our souls, our own souls. So, well, long-winded answer to say, this aligns with the gospel message, with our spiritual exercises, and this is going to help us. Not because of what we're doing for, but we need to be doing this.
So the Jesuit Prison Education Network, we're basically about a few months into this new. I mean, it's it's new. It's brand new. So we're at the very start of it, and I know Dan and I are excited about this initiative, especially having worked with guys who are incarcerated. And I love what you said about not calling them offenders or inmates, right? Because I think one of the important things about Jesuit Prison Education Network and the work that we do in prisons is affirming the dignity of people. That's right. And I guess to that question, or to that, that's what we do. What ways have you seen education in prisons impact individuals? Sure.
3 stories, if I may.
Please. Yes.
So let's start first with offenders. So I'm going to call upon my instructors, and I mean that the students in our programs wind up being, how the teacher and the pupil learns together. I consider them our instructors. So first instructor, Lisa, in Chillicothe, Missouri. Lisa said early on, and Lisa could share the story because it's public. Lisa's in for life. It's been for 28 years. Said, stop calling us offenders. She said, I offended 28 years ago, and I committed a very serious crime. And for that, I should be doing time. But I'm not offending anymore. I'm not an offender anymore. So I should not be, identified by any single. That in no way diminishes what was done wrong. But I'm not an offender. I like being known as a student. I love, she says, that we're referred to as companions. And we call that program Companions in Chillicothe. To that end, okay, how do we respond to that? If I hear that, if I truly hear that, what am I going to do about that? So we sought permission for the students to not have to wear their prison garb, but to be wearing a t-shirt from the school during classes, to your point. It's a gesture of dignity, right? We talk about putting on the clothing, the garment of Christ, right? It helps us when we went to school, right? We had to wear school clothes because it was to help us in our identity. Well, similarly, right? Students wearing the garment. So, yes, I'm aware of my, as the psalmist says, my sin is always before me, or my crime is before me. But this helps me recall my human dignity, which no one can take away under no circumstance. She's the first instructor. The second instructor is Jason, who is in a program in Regis University that's involved with 4 facilities. So we recently had a ceremony there. He completed his certificate. Again, we'll be there for life. On the day of the ceremony, Jason was wearing his academic robe, and he was the commencement speaker. And he spoke, and I'm paraphrasing here, today I wear this garment that offers me hope. Today I wear this garment that speaks of what I can become. Today I wear this garment and went on. But it covers the garment I wear every day that reminds me of the worst day and worst mistake of my life. I think that's very, very powerful, right? To be hearing that. And then the last story is Keith from Bonne Terre in St. Louis, Missouri. So Keith, completing his degree, again, will be there for life. Keith is wants to go on now and get his bachelor's in philosophy. Keith writes exceptionally well. Shares with me writings on his thoughts on philosophy, Plato and Aristotle. And Keith wanted me to know that this has been transformational because it has moved Keith from being, as he described it, a white supremacist to truly embracing his recognizing shared humanity. Those kind of things happen literally every day. Right? So we may think that we're going in and look what we're doing, we're providing education, but what's happening here is we're being instructed.
And it sounds like, Father Greg Boyle talks about it kind of extending the circle of who's included, or who belongs.
That's right.
And it sounds like that's happening mutually.
I agree.
It ultimately, the thing I think about, one of the messages that comes out of this is like everybody benefits.
Yes.
Society benefits from having,
yes.
People who we actually listen to who have great intelligence and creativity.
That's right.
And to hear their stories.
Right.
And their desires.
And to your point, it's that shared humanity. We no way want to diminish and say the crime was not committed. And there needs to be a reconciliation. But how do we go about that reconciliation, right? And is the reconciliation, are we really being well served by warehousing and spending so much money to warehouse? What's our goal here? We speak about rehabilitation, and I'm learning a great deal from Ian and Dan about facilities where they accompany, where they work, and so I have lots to learn in terms of that system of justice here in Belize. But in the United States, rehabilitation is considered successful if someone is released from, or once they're released from prison, if they desist in committing a crime for 3 years, it's considered a statistical success. Pretty low threshold, right? So let's be honest here and say we're warehousing, we're spending billions of dollars in the United States, billions of dollars. Some people are getting very, very, very wealthy.
I was going to say it's profitable for some people.
It's a business, right? And we see people sometimes as commodities, right? What about if it truly is rooted in a conversion process, but a conversion to humanity? What does it mean to be truly human? And a conversion to a humanity which is shared. And the desire here is, as we separate someone from community, how do we bring them back into the circle? And until we figure that out, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. We're squandering resources, and we're tossing away lives.
And one thing that occurs to me, you brought up Zacchaeus earlier. Jesus calling to Zacchaeus, and one thing that occurs to me, and I think Jesus desires to do this with all people, but with Zacchaeus and the people, he truly reconciled them, meaning he brought them eye to eye again, right?
That's right.
Zacchaeus down from the tree, and then also the example of accompanying Zacchaeus, who everyone else had written off as a criminal, basically, right? He was a wealthy man, so maybe different than a lot of the people who are considered criminals here in Belize, but nonetheless, that's how people looked at him. And then Jesus reconciled, and then there was transformation that happened, conversion that happened. One thing that I think is true for here in Belize, if people heard the stories that Dan and I hear about just the history of individuals, right? What happened in their lives that led them to a point where they made the worst mistake of their life, where they made a decision to harm someone or to steal something or whatever it may be. But if you get the whole picture, right, and you truly accompany that person and you're able to sit with that, then it's hard not to be moved with compassion, right? To know that, maybe someone was, for example, sexually abused growing up and has hid that their whole lives in shame, right? Or grew up in poverty and went to bed hungry every night, or witnessed the horrific murder of one of their friends when they were 9 years old, 10 years old. These sorts of things are what people don't hear about or think about. But that's what forms individuals.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
And we need to hear these things as a society, right? To be able to have that understanding, that compassion, that these people, we are fostering the conditions which promotes and creates situations that people are in where they find themselves doing things that are harmful to themselves and to others, right? And if we hear those stories, if we allow ourselves to hear them, then I think our hearts are going to be moved. And it sounds like, in your experience in prison ministry, you call people instructors, right? It sounds like that's what's happened to you.
It's right? Mutual instruction, mutual transformation. Right? At your point, when you know someone's story, you begin to understand. You're not justifying part of their story, which was wrong, which was sinful and criminal. Right? And you're not saying, but you're getting a better understanding, maybe not, certainly not an excuse, but an explanation for it. So now that we have the explanation, what are we going to do with that understanding? And education is a way to assist folks in making good choices. And if you're not instructed, if you're not given that skill set, how can you expect someone to make a decision that's perhaps not harmful or taking of someone's life? We all benefit by instructing one another. We're in this together. And there's a facility in the United States, an infamous facility, Rikers Island. And Rikers Island takes care of just not all, but some of the boroughs of New York. It is a jail, which is supposed to be a place where you're transitioning before your arraignment and your trial, right? But it has, over the years, become this notorious jail prison. There are thousands of people there right now, maybe 7,000 or 8,000, to accommodate more. I'm just going to throw out a little trivia question here. How much do you think we're paying per year for one person in Rikers Island? Just take a guess of how much we're spending in this process. Any idea?
I have no idea.
80, 90,000.
Okay, 80, 90,000. Yeah, just right there.
If I was going high, I would say around that number. If I was going low, I'd say 20,000.
Okay. So then this statistic is stale a year because the next year's, but this is the 2021 numbers, 540,000. So
Per person.
per person, per year.
Per year.
Right.
Wow.
So think of what you could do with that, right? Even if you had 80,000 of that,
Right.
or even 20,000 of that,
Yeah.
right? Of that 530,000. So we're deluding ourselves to thinking it's working, right?
Yeah.
And close to close to $500,000 per person per year in a facility. Is it any wonder someone sees it as an industry, as a business?
Yeah.
So, but I take that. So,
Sure. Well, Tom, thank you for I think opening up the conversation and opening certainly we are immersed in this, but even us, I think, offering a lot for us to think about and a lot for our viewers to think about. And we always end with a question that all three of us will answer.
okay.
But we put it on you first.
Oh, wow.
So,
Pressure's on.
so we get to think about it more. But the question would be very simple. Who is somebody who has inspired you and why?
Wow. There's loads of folks, I can think of teachers and individuals, friends, but I have to go back to the foundation of one's education. That's my parents. Right? They're our first instructors. Like the Geico commercials, where you're like, oh my gosh, now you become your parents and you say things and we make fun of that. But there's some wisdom, right? You say, oh my heavens, I'm channeling my mother, I'm channeling my father, right? But clearly, they gave us our lives, they gave us our faith, they gave us the foundation. We go back to that, right? It still continues to instruct and form us. And they may not have had their undergraduate degree or their PhD, but boy, oh boy, they come from a place of generosity for me. And that you realize, okay, why they gave. And it just perhaps out of a sense of obligation, but more fundamentally from a place of love.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Ian, who would you say?
Yeah, there's various people kind of flying through my mind. I'll say right now, just given the work of the past 2+ years that I've been in Belize working with people who are incarcerated, and particularly many of them are gang involved, right? I look at Greg Boyle as someone who has accompanied gang involved people, right, who are trying to get out of the life. They're trying to create a new life for themselves and to really leave the situation that they're in. And I just see Greg as Father Greg Boyle, Jesuit, who leads this Homeboy Industries, which we've talked before on the show about, but he has just given his life to really walking with these people and creating initiatives that is serving this purpose of conversion, right, and of newness for the lives of people. But he's also doing it in the face of heartbreak and of suffering, because something like 200 people that he's worked with and that he's walked with have been murdered since he started this initiative close to 20 years ago now, probably, if not more.
I think maybe even 30.
30 years ago now. And so, since I've been here in Belize, 4 young men who I've worked with have been killed after they got out of prison. And just to walk with that and to know and love, individuals that are gone, and just the pain of that, right? And so looking to Greg as someone who can balance and hold both of these things, the heartache, right, and the real pain, but also the joy. Because there is joy in our work too. There is joy there. It's often hard, it's often difficult, but we get to hear people express the desire for newness, for transformation, for God every day. And who really can say that, right? in their jobs, that they get to hear people really express these heartfelt desires. So holding both of these things at the same time of there's real pain and there's real joy. Right, and I look to Greg as someone who has done that so well, and has inspired me to in my work here. So, passing the question over to you.
You should have him on the program.
We should. We've been in touch with him since we've been here. That would be
So
It'd be a Zoom situation.
Let's extend the invitation, Greg. It's time for you to come on the program.
Somebody else who I think would be great on the program, somebody that I really look up to, a member of our province, Rafa Garcia, who's a Jesuit who works on the border in El Paso, Texas, and has been there for, a few decades, kind of off and on. But I had a chance to live with Rafa for a few weeks a few years ago, and he's currently serving as the pastor of our parish there that's 4 blocks away from the border, and in the last couple months has been getting just a deluge of people. And so the parish there has opened up to receiving people, and they're the only place in El Paso that's receiving people without documents. I don't know how people are entering without, and what I mean by that is they're not actually in the asylum process. So they're in this weird bureaucratic vacuum, and Rafa has said, no, come. He's somebody who I think just has a really big heart. For many years, he would go to a child detention center and would say mass for the kids, and it'd be like a couple thousand kids, who are separated from their parents. As somebody who, I would sit at the end of a long day, and this little house chapel that we have in the residence there, and I'd sit down to do my exam and kind of review the day prayerfully, and I would start to fall asleep, and I'd look over, and there's Father Rafa also asleep. But we were both doing it. We're both trying to look back over our day with the Holy Spirit, and sometimes that happens in your sleep a little bit. But his example, and there's many more things I could talk about with him, but I think his witness that is never, at least I've never encountered him to be one who's like kind of wagging his finger at people, but he's very much inviting people to have compassion. And he certainly gives me a great witness of how to do that. So I would say Father Rafa.
Excellent.
Great. Well, Father Tom, I want to thank you again for being with us on the show and for sharing with us a bit about your story and the great work that you're doing with JPEN. That's an initiative that we're very excited about. Please pray for JPEN and for the work that Father Tom is doing, because we're right in the beginning stages of, different universities have had ongoing education initiatives, but now we're sort of pulling together, which is just wonderful news, and very excited. So please pray for us. And thank you for joining us on the show today. We look forward to being with you again next week. God bless y'all.